Hey everyone, welcome to the season finale of my season of Lecturin Ladies. I've had such a fun time going through Kick-Ass Women of History with you guys, and I'm really excited for this last one because unlike all the other women that I have talked about so far, this woman is actually still living.
Oh,
She is a civil rights icon and an all-around badass. So her name is Gloria Richardson. She was born May 6th, 1922 in Baltimore to John and Mabel Hayes, and they actually lived in like Cambridge or moved there shortly after she was born. The Her mother was part of the affluent St. Clair family, which owned and operated a successful grocery store and funeral home. And they had been free people of color since before the Civil War. They also owned extensive rental property. She had a maternal uncle who was a lawyer in Maryland, and her family was also heavily involved in politics. So basically, like, I don't want to say a family of immense privilege, but they were definitely better off than a lot of people of color at the time. She also had a father or an uncle or something that was a lawyer. I think I mentioned that already, actually. So in Maryland at the time, black males had been able to vote since emancipation after the Civil War, and then women were added when the constitutional amendment became effective in 1920. But many black women still struggled to be able to actually vote. Just because you have the right doesn't mean you have the means. And Baltimore's black population at the time was generally segregated into the second ward, and within the wards, the black community had built up substantial religious and business communities. And they, even in Maryland, they still had Jim Crow laws at the time. You know, this is pretty common at this time. So, according to her, she also had an uncle who graduated from Harvard Law, and he actually died in his early 20s in Cambridge because of segregation. He had contracted a serious illness, and the white hospital that he went to refused to treat him, and he died before he could reach a black hospital. So she's, from a young age, living in segregation and going through, feeling its effects hardcore. She started college at age 16 and earned a BA in sociology in 1942 from Howard University, a historically black university in Washington, D.C. While in college, she participated in her first acts of civil disobedience. She picketed a segregation at a Woolworth store, and people were generally surprised by her leadership and her status as a woman from an elite black family. They were used to dealing with poor black women who were less outspoken. And she is quite outspoken, we will see. After college, she returned to Cambridge and got married and began to explore civil rights. The city government hired black people as social workers only to serve black clients in the all black ward. And another woman who was chosen over Gloria for a social worker position in the black ward, she decided to focus on her family and civic work for several years. And she was actually featured in a book in 1965 written by Robert Penn Warren. The book was called Who Speaks for the Negro? She said in that book that in Cambridge, blacks were last hired and first fired, a phrase applicable to minorities in a lot of other places in the area and, still today. So when that's my baby screaming in the background. When the civil
Very
rights,
mad at injustice.
yes. You're raising her well.
I'm raising a fighter. So when the civil rights movement came to Cambridge in 1961, it came in the form of the Freedom Riders, who were basically black citizens who were making sure that the case, I forget the name of it, but the case that said that in interstate travel was not allowed to be segregated. So they were basically putting it to the test. Like, okay, are these companies, are these, bus drivers actually abiding by these rules? So in December 1961, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, sent Reginald Robinson and William Hanson to Cambridge to organize civil rights actions. SNCC had been contacted by activists in the city.
They do call it SNCC, by the way.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah.
SNCC.
Just FYI.
I like it. That's much easier to say.
Yes.
And they had been contacted by activists in the city, basically asking for help. And these two young men started sit-ins in February to protest the segregated facilities. They targeted segregated movie theaters, bowling alleys, restaurants, the whole shebang. One of the teenagers who started taking part in these protests was Gloria's teenage daughter, Donna. And she, I don't have the exact quote here, but Gloria basically said that they were arresting their kids. And that's when she got more directly involved. So there was Gloria, and there was another mother, Yolanda Sinclair, who became very heavily involved and showed their support for these teenagers that were leading the way. In June 1962, Gloria was asked and helped organize the Cambridge Nonviolent Action Committee, CNAC. Is there a word for that one? Do you know? Connect. And that was actually the first adult-led affiliate of SNCC, and she became its official spokesperson. The organization had initially formed in March of that year, and after the CNAC canvassed Black communities in a survey, they expanded the goals to work for economic equality, to improve housing, education, employment, and healthcare. A lot of issues that we still have today. And she said later in an interview on why she was committed to the leadership, "The one thing we did was to emphasize that while you should be educated, that education, degrees, college degrees were not essential here. If you could articulate the need, if you knew what the need was, and if you were aware of the kinds of games that white folk play, that was the real thing." So she was basically aware not everyone's going to have the education level that she did, but you still had a right to have good employment, healthcare, a good living situation. In the summer of 1962, CNAC focused on voter registration in an effort to get out the vote. They wanted to replace State Senator Frederick Malkus, who had opposed legislation that would have allowed additional industries into Dorchester County, Maryland, and the lack of industrial jobs limited opportunities for the Black community. She later recalled that she had been a rebellious person since childhood, but also identified as an adult in a community of militant Black women. She said, quote, "I think I turned out like a lot of women in Cambridge. They did their cooking and ironing, but I don't remember them walking 2 steps behind anybody. And I think the men knew that. Later, most of the members of our civil rights groups were women. When we were attacked at demonstrations, they were the ones throwing stones back at the whites." So the women were leading the charge for change. The sit-ins and civil unrest continued into 1963, and local officials appealed to the governor to help to control the protests, saying that they were disrupting business. The governor at the time, J. Millard Tawes, imposed martial law and a curfew in the city and appealed to the president, at the time Kennedy, to order in the National Guard. And when President Kennedy demanded that the locals stop their protests, Gloria responded that the president could go to hell. In June 1963, the Cambridge protests had attracted students and other activists from around the country. On June 11th, white patrons at Disneyland, not Disneyland, because the first time I read that, I was like, what? Disneyland had attracted 6 white and Black demonstrators conducting a sit-in there. General Gelston of the National Guard announced that he was changing the rules of martial law. He announced a curfew of 9 p.m. instead of 10, stores were to close at 2 p.m. instead of 9, firearms were banned, and automobile searches by police and National Guard were authorized. So, a pretty big difference in the rules there.
Yeah.
And at 8 p.m. that night, 250 Black protesters staged a freedom walk to the Dorchester County Courthouse. Shortly after the demonstrators stopped to pray, they were attacked and pelted with eggs by crowds of more than 200 white townsfolk. 2 carloads of whites drove in and started a gunfight with armed black protesters. State police used tear gas and guns to disperse the mob.
Jesus.
Yeah, which, you know, all sounds pretty familiar. The federal government intervened in an effort to end the violence and protests. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy at the time and other Justice Department officials brokered a 5-point Treaty of Cambridge to include a statement for equal rights that was signed in July. The Attorney General, representatives of the state of Maryland, local black leadership, including Gloria, and elected Cambridge officials were all signatories. So she's right there, you know, she's in the room where it happened for Hamilton fans. James Broadley, 78, who accompanied Gloria in Cambridge, said then Governor Millard Tawes waited until Gloria and the other activists were away to call the National Guard on protesters. Gloria, Broadley, and others returned to prevent any potential clashes. So he's watching them to see when they leave. Then he thinks he can call in the National Guard, and they said no. So we're going to come back and settle this. Broadley said in a quote, "This little lady coming right there with guns pointed at her, and she takes her hand and shoves it out of the way and kept walking," Broadley said. "I wasn't afraid," Gloria said. "I was upset. And if I was upset enough, I didn't have time to be afraid. And besides, we had guns too." So I want to show you guys this picture of her pushing that gun away. Look at her
That's
face.
so cool. She's like, I don't have time for your shit.
Done. So done. And then the second picture is right after that. This gun has a bayonet. Like, we'll post the picture, but for those who can't see right now, there's a bayonet at the end of this giant gun. And she's just like looking at this guy like, "Are you serious?" Pushes it away.
Yeah.
Freaking amazing. So by the autumn of 1963, Black children in Cambridge were attending previously all-white schools, bus transportation was desegregated, the library and the hospitals were desegregated, and a Black policeman was on the force and was promoted. In this period, Gloria rose to national prominence as a civil rights leader. In August 1963, she was saluted as one of the 6 Negro women fighters for freedom, featured on the stage of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, right behind Dr. King. Like most of the other women that day, however, she was not permitted to address the crowd. She said hello to the audience before the microphone was taken out of her hand and she was shown off. And I guess I didn't get into the details much, but I guess she had her disagreements with Dr. King quite a few times because she wanted more action and she was willing to get more aggressive if needed.
Right.
So in December of 1963, she attended a national meeting of SNCC leaders in Atlanta where they discussed the future direction of the organization. Present were many other civil rights leaders at the time, including John Lewis, as well as tons of staff and volunteers. Ella Baker and Howard Zinn led questioning to help the mostly young leaders work toward their vision for activism. Gloria inspired those seeking to radicalize SNCC, both in terms of her focus on economic security and her challenging of nonviolent ideology. So she's like, listen, if it comes to it, it comes to it. Both sides had been armed in Cambridge in June 1963. In Atlanta, they discussed and planned for an extended voting rights program to be conducted in the South the next year, which was an election year. In May 1964, Gloria led a march in Cambridge protesting an appearance by segregationist George C. Wallace at the Firemen's Arena, a segregated ice skating rink that had been the target of many of the original protests. In July 1964, President LBJ signed the historic Civil Rights Act, officially prohibiting segregation in public facilities, and the National Guard was finally withdrawn from Cambridge. So this is like over a year that's been like militant in Cambridge. Throughout her fight for civil rights, she was arrested 3 times and received a plethora of death threats. In June 1964, Gloria left Cambridge for New York City. She remarried Frank Danbridge, a photographer who, for, I believe, Life magazine. She had become acquainted with him during the demonstrations, and they decided to settle in the city. She worked for a time in an advertising agency before taking a job with the city's Department for the Aging, where she helped ensure businesses complied with laws that affected seniors. She retired in 2012 at age 90, while largely retiring. Yeah, 90.
That was not the year or age I was ready to hear.
Services for seniors. Let me just sign up while I'm here, making sure you're
Yeah,
doing the right
like,
thing.
I'm
Wait,
older
fast
than
for
most
herself.
of the people I'm
Smart.
helping, but it's fine.
It's fine.
She's like, I'm going to do this my damn self. I know exactly what we need. While largely retiring from public life, she worked with Harlem Youth Opportunities Unlimited, Associated Community Teams, and the New York City Department for the Aging. And there's a really good, I think it's Washington Post article that they interviewed her last year during the summer and the Black Lives Matter protests and everything. And we'll link it. But to summarize, she said, it's not going to get better unless more people take part and unless we do more. So she's like, we're fighting for a lot of the same things that we were 60 years ago about. So, and she talks about like her quotes and stuff and talks about the photo of her pushing the gun away and everything. And there's like a little video of her, and she's just awesome. So, she's been doing this her whole life. So,
Yeah, that's crazy. When's her birthday?
What'd I say, 6th? Let me check.
I was just curious when she'll be 100, like soon.
Yeah, definitely in May. Let me check the date.
So she's got like
May 6th, 1922.
So she's got a year and a couple months. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
She'll be 99 this year.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And she's just been like being a badass for like.
She's a May baby and she's a social worker, so why would she not be a badass?
It's true.
That's true.
Damn Tauroses.
I'll say I know another one of those, so whatever. I get it.
Just saying.
That's insane. I don't want to work till I'm 90, though.
Dude,
I mean, we probably will
now.
have to.
Probably.
True.
And
But
ours
I don't
won't
wanna
even be
work
for
till
like,
I'm
a good
33,
cause.
honestly. But
right? Okay.
I mean, I guess if you're making a difference.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's probably a difference maker as well, like for you. So.
Kept her going. Still
Kept her
keeping
young,
going.
I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could live to 99, I'll work like
Then I might would
fine.
work. Fuck it. Why not? I ain't got shit else to do.
Right.
So
Maybe it's
props
like
to
when
Gloria.
you hear like when people retire and then they're like, "Oh, I'm stuck at home with my husband all day. I need to
Yeah.
go back to work."
Like, this is the worst, actually. I don't want
Send
any
him
part
back
of
to
this.
work.
Well, that's really cool.
I know. I really liked this series. We had a whole bunch of fuck around and find out women. It was awesome.
Yeah. And, goals. That's
Seriously.
what I aspire to be. I had a
So
lot of fun.
it was super fun. I start next week and I have narrowed down my topics and decided I'm definitely gonna do cults.
Cool.
I'm very
Oh.
excited. Because I started off with a list of 12 cults that I've narrowed down to 6. I got to get rid of one more, but it's hard right now. But I'm very, very, very excited.
That'd be
That's
cool.
exciting.
Yes.
Just don't do Dodgers or Yankees fans as a
I
cult.
know. I'm not doing baseball
maybe you
fandom
should.
of cults.
What about Twitter?
They definitely qualify, but I'm not doing them. We don't have the time, really.
Twitter as cult.
Yeah, we just don't have the time.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, well, thank you for teaching us, Marla.
Yes,
we learned
thank
a
you.
lot.
Thanks for going on the journey with me. I had a lot of fun, and I'm hoping to next time do something even more fun. So, but thank you so much for listening, everybody, to all of our seasons so far. And we see you next Friday.
Bye.
See ya.